January at the movies saw Emilia Perez set a record for a foreign language movie of 13 Oscar nominations to lead the field heading into the 2025 award ceremony. It was also, fun fact, the first ever Best Picture nomination to feature the line being sung, penis into vagina. So there you go. It's a interesting one. And what's crazy, I think, about this is that it isn't unexpected because this was rumored Emilia Perez is going to clean up at the Oscars, but also it's really difficult to the point that I haven't found one person who's like, that's a great movie, like who actually loves this movie. Like, we talked about it, we're like, yeah, it's fine, it's fine, it's interesting. But Tom, as we get kicked off here, starting a brand new year, Ger and Tom Pot, as always, reviewing the movies and discussing the big talking points from the month at the movies. Tom, I want to get your thoughts. What is your least loved Best Picture winner in history?
It's hard to say Best Picture winner. I mean,
Okay.
there's definitely a few that there's obviously the famous example has kind of become Crash. That's like the modern, like, as soon as like Amelia Perez got all those nominations, people were like, oh, it's Crash, but for trans people, as opposed to Crash being about racism, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, a recent example, I mean, I think everyone was kind of a little bit stunned that Green Book did as well as it did at the Oscars not that long ago. I think when it came to nominations, I was kind of, and what this really reminded me of. I mean, when Green Book won, it was one thing,
Okay.
and it kind of felt like I can't believe that's a winner because
Yeah.
I was no lover of that film. I thought it was fine, but then I had
Yeah.
people actually come up to me like because you always see like reactions on the internet, and you're like, yeah, that's how I feel. Surely no one in real
Yeah.
life feels that way. But I had people come up to me and be like, "Yo, we're wrong about Green Book. I heard what you said about it. It's good." And I was like, "Okay." But one that really
That's
jumped out to me, and it's kind of it was actually nominations that burned me, where I was like, I can't believe
okay.
that got nominated for Best Picture, right? And I want to take it back to it must have been like, I don't know, what are we, the 82nd Academy Awards or the 81st? It was the year of 2008, right? And I'm
Okay.
bringing you back there to talk about the next Academy Awards after that, because something very important happened at that Academy Awards, which is that The Dark Knight wasn't nominated for Best Picture.
Right.
And the Academy got so annoyed by that the next year they were like, fine, there's not five Best Picture nominees, now it's 10. And it screwed up everything because now there's so many films that are like Best Picture nominee that it's like, why is that? Why is that there? You know, it doesn't have to be 10, right? Because the
Yeah.
following year at the Academy Awards, Avatar got nominated for Best Picture. And it had more nominees than anyone that year. I think it was tied with the Hurt Locker for most nominations. And
Mm.
that just made me go, okay, Best Picture isn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
It was like the total moment where like mask off. It doesn't matter about the Best Picture nominees. I was like, well, clearly it doesn't matter because Avatar is not a Best Picture nominee. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, if I had to pick a winner, Green Book. If I had to pick nominations, I mean, there's a lot since they've broadened it to 10. It kind of feels like Best Picture now feels even more meaningless, and I think the Emilia Perez one kind of sunk that home for a lot of people as well.
Yeah. Like, look, there's a perfectly valid argument to say none of this matters. Like, it is
Yeah.
ultimately the opinion of a very select and tight knit view. And later we're going to discuss this year's Oscar nominations and give our hot takes in. And I'm going to tip into that a little bit more then. Um, but I agree. For me, Green Book is, yeah, the obvious one of winners recently, where it's like, I genuinely like. I'm surprised that you had people come up to you because I had the opposite experience. I've
Mhm.
never. I didn't even know people who'd seen Green Book for the most part. You know what I mean? It just wasn't something that people watched. I remember watching it and like I'd never contextualized it as this could be in the race. Like, it was just like it was mental. It was mad, and it was one of these kind of Emilia Perez things. And again, I'll kind of tip into that later on. This one is one where I think I'm the only person that absolutely loads this movie, but I don't get why, because Nomadland can fuck right off. Like, what the fuck was that? It was awful. And like, I like Frances McDormand as a person. You know what I mean? Like, well, I don't know her as a person. We don't go for points or anything like that. You know what I mean? But I like the idea of Frances McDormand. She seems a perfectly nice person and a talented actress. But whenever I see an Oscar Beatty style movie that the lead actor in it is also like producing it and the person behind it, I'm like, here we go. And it's one of those very Leonardo DiCaprio and The Revenant where it's like this person is going to suffer for you. And I just didn't get what the point of it was. And it made us sit there for so long and endure this person's difficult life. And the movie is just so devoid of any point, or it's devoid of any like kind of raison d'etre. Like I get what they were going for, that it was like, oh, isn't it awful? So many people are homeless. Like what happens when a big company in a small town, blah, 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 blah. But like then they didn't actually get into the socioeconomic side of things. They just focused on, look how this person lives. Ew. And it was Hollywood like just kind of gawking at poor people and just going, oh my God, imagine living in that. And then telling themselves they're good people by nominating it and go, how did you do it, Francis? It was just, I hate that fucking movie. It is what annoys me about Oscar Beatty movies and like almost makes me wish that we didn't have an award season. But then when I'm in award season, that's what we're going to discuss, because in Ireland, for whatever reason, we end up getting a big, like in America, they call January Dumpury when it comes to the movies, but in Ireland, it's kind of different because we get a lot of the Best Picture nominees come out like around this time over here for whatever reason, and you get a lot of good movies as a result of that. So I don't hate it, but then I hate some of the results and stuff like that as well. We're gonna talk like the 2025 nominees and give our hot takes as we go on. And it's been a really, like, do you know what? Like, Tom, do you remember when we discussed 2024 at the movies and I kind of spoke about how movies you wouldn't necessarily expect are packing the houses again? And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's back. I don't know about you, but I had full houses for, and I wrote it down, Nosferatu, A Real Pain, and Baby Girl, all full houses.
Yeah.
It was
I
really
mean,
cool. Like,
it
it
was
was a
it was
busy
like
month.
I think what was even that was even a surprise to cinemas, because one of the cinemas in my city were like, "Don't worry, we're actually adding extra screenings in Nosferatu." The
Yeah.
other cinema I went to, after like its third week, moved it to a bigger screen.
Yeah.
And to say like, yeah, people are going to see, a remake of a vampire movie that's over 100 years old. Like that's one you wouldn't like. Oh, that wasn't on my bingo card to be like such a huge hit. But thank God, because yeah, it seems like cinema audiences are eclectic more than they used to be. I think, you
Yes.
know.
A Real Pain got me. Like, and I know
Mm,
essentially it's probably trading a lot off the fact of Kieran Culkin being very similar to his character in Succession, and everyone loves Succession. So I
mm,
imagine that's what did it. And look, Jesse Eisenberg is quite popular, especially since the Social Network and all. But I was like, this is a very, I'm used to seeing these kind of movies with like 20 people max,
yeah,
and it was full and it was great to see. I loved it. And Baby Girl like had the 50 Shades crowd. Like that's who was in for that, and it made that interesting. We're gonna discuss the movies of the month as well. But and then also, if we have time, I want to get into a discussion around laughing in the cinema, because it's become kind of the trending topic in kind of movie. But as we always do on this show, I want to hear. We don't know obviously what each other's pick is, but Tom, we want to get to your movie of the month and why. Hit me with it, because there's a lot of contenders this month, and there's a lot of amazing. What annoys me sometimes about January, and the fact that we get kind of the Best Picture or Oscar nominations dump, is that we're gonna have to not talk about some great movies. So I'm
yeah.
dying to hear what was your favorite of the bunch.
I found this very, very tricky because obviously there was a lot of great
Mm,
movies.
yeah.
It's also a movie that I didn't see in January. um, I saw this at
Okay.
the Cork Film Festival, and I haven't
Okay.
sat through it again.
Okay.
And I was really going back and forth. Um, but I want to see it again, even though it's incredibly long. I'm going to
Mm,
put my movie of the month as The Brutalist.
yeah. Same.
Um,
We matched.
thank God, right.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
I mean, it's one that is going to be a really tough sell to people. And I'm not going to lie, as much as I'm a cinephile, a big movie guy. on paper, this is a tough sell even to me. Like I was like, I'm buying a ticket because I've heard great things. But when someone's like, you're going to sit down and watch a nearly 4 hour movie about an immigrant and architecture, you're like, oh God, is this going to be another one of those Oscar baity, bullshitty symbolism kind of films that just bores you to death? And I was kind of shocked that it didn't. And honestly, for a film as long as it is, and I feel like that's the big issue that people are facing with this film, and that's why I'm addressing it up front before I get into the film. It's incredibly well paced,
Yeah.
and it's bringing back something that I hope is going to be more normalized, which is the intermission, which
Yes.
is genuinely built into the film. It's not like a cinema choice. If you go see this film, there will be an intermission. And this is we kind of often overuse a certain word with film, which is the word like epic. And this is what an epic is. You know, it is broad and sprawling and kind of all encapsulating in its themes and ideas and overwhelming at times. But the way it's done is so incredible. I have not seen Brady Corbet's other films, and so this was kind of my introduction to him. And yeah, right away I was like, I'm going to have to check out everything he does in the past and anything he does in the future because I think this is a film that just manages to take such complex ideas and weave it into such a kind of weirdly simple narrative in a lot of ways. You know, like it's taking on ideas of the American dream and immigration, and you can kind of apply it to lots of different scenarios. Like there's ideas here about the kind of creative vision people have and the confidence that comes with that, as far as like people who are backing it financially. And in that way, you can kind of look at it as, you know, an analogy for the film industry or an analogy for anything else, or kind of what's even going on with the political system in large parts of the world right now. The performances, I honestly feel like I have to issue a public apology because there's one actor in this who I've constantly shat on because I just like I don't get the appeal.
Mm.
Guy Pearce. Um,
Yes.
I just have to fall on my sword and say, man, I'm sorry. You were outstanding in this. He is
Mm.
just fantastic. And what I love about a film that takes place over such a large stretch of time, and I mean narratively, not the film's running time, you actually get a really good chance to watch these characters develop and change.
Yeah.
And that perfectly works within the narrative as well because you're watching a character kind of get comfortable with certain ideas and people, and then all of a sudden it kind of changes. And with a film that is this big and this epic, it's kind of a hard sell in that there's so much going on and there's also so much little going on. So like when I saw this at the film festival, people were like, "What was your highlight?" I was like, "It was The Brutalist," and then I had to try explain what it was about, and I was like,
Yeah.
"It's about an immigrant architect," and then
And
it's like,
do you know what it
you
is,
know,
right? And this is I had a similar conversation, and it's like, what did the guy who invented the lounger chair do after the war? But it's good.
yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, that's it. It's about nothing, but it's mad. It is
It's everything and
conceptual.
nothing all at once, you
Yeah,
know. But like,
yeah.
look, it's I mean, cinematography is gorgeous throughout the whole film. Even like, there's really simple images in this. Like, there's a moment where they show this kind of completed room, and you're just like, whoa, just because of the way
Mm.
it's shot and the lighting and all this stuff. There's been a bit of controversy with the Oscars and the performances and the AI side of it, which that's a whole bucket of worms as far as the AI. I think people are kind of overblowing it. I think this is probably the
Agree.
most backstabby Oscar race I remember in a long
Yeah.
time. It seems like everyone is coming out of the woodwork. But I think
But
Adrian Brody in
like
this is
in
outstanding, you
AI,
know?
let's talk about the AI, because the
Okay.
controversy, for anyone who hasn't heard it, is the movie uses particularly because there's like Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones, the two. Well, no, Guy Pearce is also, you call him a lead, although he's going for support in this.
Hmm.
Um, but essentially, they are Hungarian immigrants, and in an effort to be true to kind of the Hungarian accents, Brady Corbett had like used what's called respeech or AI to kind of touch up a lot of the Hungarian and make sure that it would be perfect even to a Hungarian ear, because it's quite a difficult language to hear. And yeah, again, it is like a lot of controversy around that has come about, and it's come about with the timing of this as well, because the Brutalist has been out for a few months in America,
Yeah.
but only now it's become an issue. What were your thoughts on that? And as well, there was also visual AI, in the end sequence. There were some buildings and pictures and stuff and designs that were
I
AI in the background. What are your thoughts on
I
that?
my feelings on AI are getting so much more complex and like because it feels like this was the big conversation when we had the strikes not that long ago, and kind of it feels like we're constantly now being like AI bad in filmmaking, and it's not that. It's a far too simplistic take.
Yeah, I agree.
Like what we actually define as AI needs to be more fine-tuned. You know what I mean? Like even before all this, what we're now defining as AI was being used by people. Like people are using visual software. Like say like if you were using Photoshop or any of these things, there's content aware fill and all this stuff. Or like certain sound designs that you're using. That's all technically AI. Like it's
Yeah,
computer learning used to refine a creative process. And that right now people are saying, "Oh, it's AI, it's bad." Like David Fincher re-released Seven recently, and he used AI in that because he was really unhappy with a shot. But are we going to all of a sudden say, "Oh, well, he doesn't have the right to do that," or there's less creative merit in doing it? No, no, he basically has grown as a filmmaker to do that, and using AI to correct something that otherwise would be impossible to create. And I think the problem is that people are going to abuse AI, but I don't think this is an example of that. Like you're using
no, I
it to
agree.
refine something, and they're using it to discredit a whole performance when it's such a minor aspect of it. And I think that's wrong. So I
Yeah,
think it's more that we need to get a more stringent idea of what is acceptable and not with AI, and people just are kind of unaware of it, and now it's just become AI bad, and I don't think you can just say that, and that's kind of
yeah,
where the problem is.
totally agree. It's like there are so many AI tools out there right now that I like the worst case scenario, and it was very much painted in that, was that again, essentially, um, actors had signed away their lives and signed away their image rights and stuff like that, and that movies could come out again. The episode of Black Mirror, if you watched the last season, episode 1, where they essentially just started making personalized Netflix TV shows, starring like Salma Hayek was kind of the star in that episode, but they could just make shows that cater to you specifically using actors' images because the algorithm tied with AI and they had the image rights and so on. That's what the fear around AI is. But there's so many amazing tools out there. Like I use AI day to day in both my day job, but also in terms of like low blows and page 180 and stuff like that. Like there's stuff that it can just do in seconds that there's no point and it doesn't make sense. And you wouldn't do it if you had to pay someone to do it. So it can just improve things in small ways. This to me is exactly on the right way. And I think we just have to get used to this. It's here. The war is lost. Like, so
Yeah.
it is just, yeah. And again, I did want to get into it because it is a big discussion point, but also it shouldn't be a discussion point because it's not something that's going away. So yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying there.
Mhm.
But anyway, sorry, I could have crossed you there.
No, like again, I think with regards to the film in general, like when you're looking down the list of everything, I'm like, what makes a film like a masterpiece?
Mm.
And you go, okay, has this element, this. Like I'm not going to say like that this is a perfect film or one that I'm going to constantly come back to because
Yeah,
it does kind of weigh on you, as such a massive chunk of film like this. But I can't really think of a film from last year I'd written a top 10 of films that I saw last year, and The Brutalist is included because I saw it at the film festival and it was top of the list there.
mm.
I don't see how it couldn't really be a top of 10 contender at the end of this year because I don't think I've ever seen anything really like it, you know.
Mm.
And I think the fact that they managed to make something that feels like important and interesting and different without it feeling overbearing is amazing. And when you look at like score, lighting, cinematography, performances, story, all of those elements that they just all worked so well together for something that really should feel like an impossible task based on the subject matter. How can you view this as a film that's not outstanding?
Yeah,
So yeah, that it was one that almost slipped my mind because again I saw it in November. But when I actually remembered, I was like, oh, it's this is easy. And that's not to discredit any other film because it's been an amazing month of film, but I think this is one that just had to be the movie of the month for me.
I didn't find it easy necessarily, and I want to give shout outs to movies we won't get a chance to discuss on this episode, but were excellent, like A Real Pain, which I very much enjoyed, and also Nickel Boys. I want to give a shout out to very interesting, shot in first person perspective, and kind of you see it through the eyes literally of two different characters, and everyone acting towards kind of camera. But again, story, like in terms of how it's produced, it is very original, but in terms of story, it's more traditional, what we're used to seeing at this time of
Agreed.
year. And for me,
Yeah.
but this is an achievement. This is something that pushes the form in a way. And I agree with you in that I probably stopped short of calling it a masterpiece because, and this is kind of, you know, the nature of something that attempts to span 3 decades worth of storytelling in the space of 3 hours, 34 minutes. It's not perfect. Because how can it be? Because there's so much of it. There's going to be decisions to make that like they didn't get fully right, and there's going to be nits you can pick and so on. But I went into this with much the same reservations or nerves so much that you did, in that it's like, 4 hour movie that's essentially like vaguely about the war, I believe, but I don't really know how they're going to twist it. And then I kind of saw it and I'm like I kind of got, as I was getting closer to see it, I was like, okay, like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. It feels a bit Oscar baity. I heard about the intermission and I'm like, that's a gimmick. Like, this is just to show how epic it is and blah, blah, blah. And then, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to make a day of this. I'm going to make an afternoon of it. I'm going to book in. I'm going to get a recliner screen. I'm going to be comfortable for the 4 hours that I'm going to be there. And I'll go in with an open mind. And then I watch the first scene. And the first scene is essentially a wife, like played by Felicity Jones, narrating a letter to her husband, Adrian Brody, who we understand is on a boat somewhere. And he emerges from that boat, and it's essentially telling the story of her because they've been separated in different camps, but Brody has obviously managed to escape, and he's on the boat to where he's going, and then she is kind of just trying to live the best. She says that she's met some friendly Russian people who've kind of helped kind of get them to safety, but they may not be safe. And again, they're men. It's time of war. Are they in constant danger and so on? And it's kind of a harrowing kind of setup to the movie. And then as Adrian Brody gets out of the boat, we see the Statue of Liberty, and then there's that epic score of da 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 that you've seen if you've seen the ad. But the Statue of Liberty is sideways, and I'm like, I get it. It's the American dream gone sideways. Like, that's what the movie is actually about. Again, it's the and what I found so impressive about it is it feels so timely in a way that has become like so relevant over the past couple of weeks since Trump got back, of what is America, and the America that we're told is great versus this looks like a hellscape. And it tries to, and again, but so many people travel to America with that in mind, and there's kind of a discussion of throughout the movie and a conversation in it that the movie asks of, are we actually in the right place here, or is there a better place for us? Like, is this actually home and what we dreamed of? And how actually people come out, these talented people come over to America, and the American dream, the traditional story we're told, tells us that they, if they have talents and they're willing to work hard, can go on to do incredible things. And that's true. They can be around billionaires and they can be around kind of decadence, and they can be celebrated and told nice things, but can they ever be truly part of the American elite, even if they have elite talent? Or is that kind of cut off? And is there just people that will always look at them differently? Will always look at a Jewish man and say, what's wrong with your nose? Or kind of make kind of cutting comments and so on, or make assumptions about people. And that's kind of at the core of this. And what I loved about the movie is that it lets you settle and live in that. It doesn't try and feed you that narrative. It very much tells you that story, but it lets you get there yourself in your own time because they have so much time. There's several kind of instances, and particularly one long extended conversation scene between Adrian Brody and Guy Pearce, which kind of like one of the best scenes I've seen in cinema in the past decade more. And it's just two guys talking. It's just two guys
Yep.
having conversations and just talking about who they are. It is exposition, but does never feels expositional, never feels kind of try hard or anything. It's two actors just fucking cooking. Um, and then you're still not sure what movie this or what story the movie's trying to tell you. And then the second act, it kind of tries, obviously, or the second half post intermission, it pays off. Like you said, it's beautiful. The cinematography is absolutely fantastic. The score is epic. Daniel Blumberg, giving him a shout out here. It looks gorgeous. Like, I think are just such simple scenes that were made beautifully. It was shot in VistaVision, actually, which was first used in the original Star Wars, but is kind of seen as aging technology, but it kind of leans on the old to make something that you feel like you've never seen before. For me, and this is just a weird one, it was very there was one shot where essentially it was just a beautiful color contrast. Like someone is wearing an orange kind of coat, but there's a big coal background, and it's like decadence, poverty, like living hand in hand, side by side in America. But also, like, the reason it was shot in VistaVision was first off to be able to give them 35mm and 70mm cuts to be able to release so you can watch it in the epic way that Brady Corbett wants you to watch it, but also to give it that 50s vibe. It feels like a movie that you could watch in the 50s, but also it feels like a movie that is pushing cinema forward in 2025, and it manages to achieve both. And I think for me, when I thought about it and weighed everything up with the three movies that I was looking at for movie of the month, what swung it is that this is the movie I'm still thinking about. This is the movie that is still staying with me. This is the movie I'm still not 100% sure, like, were they good people? Were they right? What was that? And again, everyone in this is flawed, even though it does tell a very clear story, but also just the achievement of making a 3 hour 34 movie that never felt like 3 hours and 34 minutes. Like the intermission was brilliant. Love it. Love it. I'm a big admirer of movies that can tell an effective story in 90 to 120 minutes. But there is space for movies that are 3+ hours, but you have to fucking justify it. And it has to not feel that length at any stage. And intermissions are a great way of doing that. Like if you can split your story clearly into two and give us an intermission in the middle, go out. I had a smoke. I went to the bathroom. I didn't need to, there was no point in thinking I need to go to the bathroom or anything like that because they gave me a break. And I got to enjoy it. But I also got to process it and think about the first half of the movie. And it set me up nicely for it. This is just a cinematic achievement. It's an epic. It's not perfect. I don't think, like, it's very similar to you. I don't think it's going to be, on my greatest of all time list, or one that I constantly go back to. But in a race for, is this the best movie of the month? It makes it very easy when you kind of weigh everything up. Even though I do want to give love to A Real Pain and Nickel Boys because they are excellent movies that are both worth seeing. But yeah, this is definitely the movie of the month, and it is one that's hotly contested. It's very much in the Best Picture race, and that's what I want to kind of discuss next because we had the Oscar nominations. The Brutalist was one that cleaned up, and obviously Wicked, another one, got 10 nominations, same as the Brutalist, but it was Emilia Perez, which had 13 nominations. Kneecap, Ireland's main hope, got snubbed. Dune Part 2, there was rumors that it was going to get a complete snub or be kind of that one that gets all the technical nominations but doesn't actually get it. Got Best Picture in the end. It was obviously my number one last year. But Tom, like, we could discuss the nominations and do a whole podcast on it itself. We don't have the time for that. We've a lot of movies to get to, so I'm just going to ask you for one. What is your main hot take away from the Oscar nominations?
I mean, I think it is hard to pick just one, isn't it? Definitely. I mean, all the Emilia Perez stuff, I don't get it at all. Like, I watched it and I was like, this isn't even like the best film I've seen like this week. So the fact that then all the nominations came out, I was shocked. But even putting that aside, because that seems very obvious, there's one nomination here, and I feel kind of harsh for saying it because this is something that the Academy often does, where it'll be like it's a legacy nomination. You know, it's like, oh, we have overlooked this person for so long, right? And I think the person did a good job with what they were given, but they also weren't given a lot. So I feel like giving them as a best supporting actress nomination is a little bit much, and that's Isabella Rossellini for
Yes.
Conclave. You know,
Hmm.
like again, totally good performance. Definitely, if someone was like, "What was she like in the movie?" I'd be like, "He was great," but she wasn't in the movie very much, and it
For
was
five
hardly a
minutes.
kind of yeah, it was hardly like a transformative performance where I was like, "Wow," you know, she did what she had to do, and that's not really enough for
Mm.
me anymore. Like again, legendary actor, absolutely deserves her flowers. But in a year where the best supporting actress category was so contested, like Margaret Qualley didn't get nominated for best supporting actress. There's other like performances I've seen this year where I'm like, would have preferred her. I mean, I don't even think she was the best nun in a film this year. I mean, like like I thought like the performances and small things like these would have had a better chance of it. But
Yes.
again, not to take away from her because I think she's a great actress and I thought she did great work. But it just kind of made me go like, that's obviously just the Academy going, we've overlooked you for too long, and like she's not going to win, right?
No.
Like I don't think there's any chance. So I don't know. It's kind of a shame, I think, because it is a hot contest, and I don't want to take it away from her. Great performance, great performer, but it's just like that one just stuck out to me among a lot of ones that stuck out to be fair. But that was the one that I was like, that's a weird one to give this year, you know?
It's the Jamie Lee Curtis nomination, and unfortunately,
It
Jamie
is.
Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere, like again, did what she was asked to do. It was really
Mhm.
interesting and fun, and I was like, I'd have loved to see more of her, but not like as in she deserved to win the best supporting actress. Like that's crazy, but it was the nod here. I think with that, it's a case of Zoe Saldana has it like nailed on, and to me, that's the
Mhm.
one thing that I can agree with Amelia Perez. I
Yep.
came away from that going, I don't know how I felt about the movie and a lot of the choices they made and stuff like that, but she was great. And I think
Yep.
that she's nailed on to win that. And I think they just worked backwards from there. And they're like, who's our friend? I was on the phone to her yesterday, so I'll give her that, and that I
Yeah.
think that's well
And
timed.
in a real irony, a lot of people were saying that, and again, we haven't had this film here. I think we get it in February, but the lad Jamie Lee Curtis is in the last showgirl, and everyone was like, she was overlooked as well. So there's the ultimate irony in all this.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
look, you can't complain if you've also like if you are a genre of Oscar winner and the genre is someone who just gets an award because they deserve it again, like because of a career accumulation rather than an actual good performance or memorable performance, then you don't get to moan about that. I am going to
yeah.
talk about Emilia Perez, okay, because
Uh-oh.
a lot of things have been said here, and no, I'm not going to be controversial here, Tom, but I am going to say that Emilia Perez is why Donald Trump is president today. That's my take on Emilia Perez. I don't dislike this movie, although its success is making me hate it
Yeah,
because
agreed.
it's
Agreed.
it's making me like go back into it and pour and look at it through that lens and going, no, this is all the points that fell down in comparison to the other movies which I really like in this list. And the movies that didn't get it, like Kneecap, fuck you, like Academy. But I understand why Kneecap didn't get it. We spoke about this like both when we reviewed it and look back at it at the end of the year. Um, it's really, really fun. It really works for Irish people who know the story, and to non-Irish people who don't know the story, it comes across as a bit like Train Spotting Light. And they just aren't going to get the context and how funny and how searing some of the humor is. But Amelia Perez is why we have Donald Trump as president right now, okay? The reality is that, like I said at the top, nobody thinks this is the best movie of the year. Nobody, not a single fucking person. It is a vaguely interesting movie. It is an experimental movie, a concept of, Mexican, potentially offensive, since it was written and conceived by a Frenchman. So it is his perception of kind of Mexican gang lord wants to become trans, and they make all of this into a musical, and how does that affect his life and stuff like that as well. And there's a lot going on, and it doesn't fall off the rails entirely, like, despite being that ambitious. But that doesn't make it the best movie or anything like that. And like, why I say it's the reason we have Donald Trump, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or just say Trump's name for the clicks or anything like that. I mean that, because this is why people, particularly Americans, are jaded with elite, like the liberal elite, the Hollywood liberal elite, the kind of the people they see as, this is what the left is, so fuck it, I'm just gonna go for the right because I don't identify with them at all. Let's just say the quiet part loud. This is here because it's a trans story in a year when trans people are very persecuted. And I am someone who has a very close relative of mine who is trans. I've worked with trans people. I've got trans friends. I'm very supportive of trans people. J.K. Rowling and her views has made me question one of the great loves of my life in Harry Potter because of that support. So this is not in any way anti-trans, but saying something is good just because it has certain elements of trans issues in it, or the lead actress who is in the best actress race, Carla Sofia Gascon, and is hotly tipped to win that, just because these people are there doesn't make it great inherently. And it feels like a combination of virtue signaling and gaslighting at the same time by telling us that this is, and that is what, when people say woke and this and that, and they invoke it in such a negative term, that's what they're speaking about. That is the feeling. And it is that feeling that is as well, like, it's not only saying that, like, exposing people to these kind of conversations that their conservative minds may not be comfortable having, but is saying that this is the best thing ever. This is better than The Brutalist. This is better than any movie you've seen, when all of us know, no matter how you feel about the issues that this movie ham-handedly at times tries to raise. Again, there is a song in this where like Zoe Saldana at one stage is talking to a doctor who performs operations, and he's like, penis into vagina, and that's the level that we're talking here. It's not the best picture, but it might win and it might clean up, and it is the backlash to that that then results in a Donald Trump, that results in a political movement happening where people are like, America needs to go back to what it really is. You know what I mean? And that's not to say don't make art like this. Definitely make art like this. Experiment, go wild. But don't tell me that this is the best. Don't tell me that this is like the best thing that anyone's seen this year, because no one thinks that. And we know you don't think that. We know everyone voting for this does not think that. We know that they are patting themselves on the back for saying, look how open I am, when really they live in the people who vote for this in the Oscars probably get into the ballot box and they probably don't ever tell anyone, but then they tick the box that says Donald Trump because they're billionaires and he looks after billionaires. And there's the hypocrisy in everything that we come to hate about award ceremonies and Hollywood and the rich liberal elite in America, that puts people off genuine issues on the left that matter and impact people's lives, and then we end up going completely the opposite direction. Hollywood, we do not give a fuck about your politics. We don't care if you're good people. We're sorry that you're guilty, that you're so rich and other people aren't, but you're not fucking helping. Just when you're faced with a question of what is the best picture, pick the movie you like the most. Don't try and make it political. Don't try and make a point out of it. Pick the movie you like the most, because now your falseness and your your fakeness is just actually harming lives here. It's pissing people off and it's leading to consequences here. Like, it genuinely drives me insane here. And again, you might say this is an overreaction, But the Oscars are an important cultural touch point in America. This is going to be discussed. People are going to feel, oh, you're shoving this shit down our throats and it's not even a good movie. Hollywood's just doing this for virtue. That's going to be the conversation that happens when this cleans up. And it's going to clean up. And again, like it's going to push it's going to push those people who've been pushed to the limit of voting for Donald Trump, even like Black and Latino people in America who he actively has policies that work against them feel pushed in this direction. This is why. This is how that happens. And it is crazy and I hate it. I don't know. Tom, am I
Yeah.
overreacting here?
No, I think you are definitely raising a lot of valid points. I mean, like, and I even taking outside the politics of it, like, I mean, this is damaging to representation and films that are
Yes.
going to deal with trans issues. Like, I would say, ask the trans community how they feel about this film because
Yeah.
it has been pretty negative for its representation. I mean, we went into how people in Mexico feel about this film. I've heard like a lot of people saying that people are genuinely going and asking for refunds in Mexico from seeing this film. And all that aside, like Hollywood like has a real smugness about it, which has
Yeah.
always been the case. You can't backslap yourself and say that's right. We're doing really good. We're giving trans representation to a film that deals with trans issues, and it's like okay, but we're not asking you to judge a film based on its politics and policies. There is some amazing films by horrendous people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like listen, we can deal with that, but don't tell us that this is a great film or these are all like we're not, we shouldn't be pushing a film based on its virtues or what it's representing. We should base on whether it's a good film,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, like Hollywood was happy to support someone like Harvey Weinstein. The
Mm-hmm.
Academy and members of the Academy booed Michael Moore when he won an Oscar for Fahrenheit 9/11 when he spoke out against the war in Iraq. Their
Yeah.
policies are flexible based on what way the wind blows.
Yeah.
So stop telling us how we should feel about certain political issues and just do your job of showing us what are the good films. Because yeah, there's going to be people that are going to say this is how they feel. Well, F them. So many people in America and the political system is based on the fact that, oh, can't wait to make those liberals cry. And it goes the other way too.
Mm-hmm.
Stop just being reactive and emotional about politics. And maybe when it comes to films, maybe just tell us this is a good film.
Yeah.
That's
That's
all you
it.
got to do. It's
That's
meant to say which is the best film this year. It's not meant to be, hey, this film is really important. I don't give a shit if it's important. Is it good?
Yeah. No,
That's
no one
all.
gives a shit. Not one single person on this planet is thinking, wow, look how open-minded that Oscar voter is. Like, no one thinks that. No one.
Yeah.
And the only thing that might come of this is maybe the negative backlash to come of this might actually dissuade voters from making this
Mhm.
stupid decision. I don't know. I've seen Hollywood make this mistake many times before. But like hopefully now there's a lesson learned from this because people are actually this has become a line in the sand moment for people now where it's like we're sick of this, we're fucking sick of this. Anyway, look, we shall see, mate. In 2 months we're beyond Mars and the movie's going well, they did it. So we'll see. I want to talk Nosferatu. Obviously we spoke at the start of the show, full houses and great to see. Just again, regardless of your thoughts on the movie itself, we're cinema lovers and we love watching movies in the cinema. So seeing something like this be such a huge success when even cinemas themselves weren't expecting it, obviously weren't. For those who may have missed it, although that doesn't seem to be a lot of people, it's a remake of the 1922 silent film, which is inspired / ripped off Dracula to the point that they just renamed it and came up with a slightly different concept, but the original filmmakers just didn't want to pay royalties. It's written and directed by Robert Eggers, who's described himself as obsessive with the source material, to the point that he co-directed a stage version in high school. Robert Eggers, you may know him from The Northman, most recently as well. Star-studded cast, obviously, you've got Bill Skarsgård as the titular character, you've got Nicholas Hoult, Lily Rose, Depp, Willem Dafoe, Aaron Taylor-Johnson. But the question that I have to ask is, we're not going to get into a full review, but do you feel that the vampire movie is back after this? Because, and I'll kind of just lead the conversation with a point. The first time I heard Nosferatu speak, and Bill Skarsgård is someone I have a lot of admiration for. I think he's taken the mantle almost from oh my god, why am I blanking? Gollum. Why am I blanking on this? um,
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis, yes, Andy Serkis. He's taken the mantle of him for as this great character actor who can just do no matter what. The first time he spoke, and he's like, "I am Nosferatu," and I'm like, "Oh, it's Nandor." And like what we do in the shadows. I'm like, it's Nandor. He's doing Nandor's voice, and that's kind
Yeah.
of what where the vampire like story and mythology is, that it's actually great source for comedy now. And this is a very serious movie with someone who is a serious lover of this type of content. Did this do enough to kind of revitalize the genre? Will we see more of this now as a result? Will we see kind of a rebirth, so to speak, full unintended, of the vampire movie?
I think what's so interesting about the vampire subgenre is every generation kind of makes it their own. Like if you were to look at vampires in cinema, you have like it keeps kind of evolving with time. Like if you go to 80s, you have the Lost Boys, the modern interpretation, we had Twilight, and there's never going to be an empty void for vampire movies. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a vampire movie coming out, is it like in like the next in like March? I'm not going to say the movie because it kind of seems like a spoiler depending.
Yeah.
But basically we are never going to be rid of vampire movies, and thank God for it, because there's so much you can do with it, as whether you want to make them allegorical, whether you want to dive into the lore established by Bram Stoker, or you want to do something different. This is a what I hope, and I think I'm one of very few people flying this flag. I love classic monsters. I
Yeah.
love me the Universal monsters. I would love, because we also had the release of Wolfman this month and it didn't really go the way I would have wanted and many other people would have wanted. I hope that this is getting to a stage where we have kind of like we've had elevated horror in the last decade and a half now, probably. I'm hoping this is kind of the birth of elevated monster films, because we also have this year Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Robert Eggers has announced that his next film coming in Christmas 2026 is going to be a werewolf movie. And I think that that's what we kind of need, because there's a genuine idea that the monsters aren't working anymore, that they're outdated. And I would love if this was the start of it. I think this is exactly how you do it. You take something that is old and classic, and you don't have to bring it into the new generation. You don't have to bring it into modern times. Like Robert Eggers recently was like, I don't ever want to make a movie with like cars and cell phones in them. And I was like, that man is a lunatic, but okay. Um, but he's made so many interesting films. Like he made The Witch and The Lighthouse as well, and I've loved both of them. He's got such an amazing, like his use of language in his films is so underrated. Just does such amazing work with that, and like this is a film that I think shouldn't work. Like it shouldn't be bringing in a packed house of young people to go see Nosferatu. Like Nosferatu was the film you watch when you go to film school or you study film.
Mm.
That's how I ended up seeing it. And then it's like, oh, there's a big budget Nosferatu coming out, and we're all really anticipating and excited for it. What the fuck? This I think is though going to be the bar, maybe for this remainder of the decade of the vampire movie,
Mm.
because it's kind of taken, we've had so many kind of pulpy trashy vampires in the last few years. This is one where it's like, okay, but what if we take the vampires seriously? What if we start doing things like that are a bit more experimental? What if we start doing interesting visuals and really treating it like the art that it so often is? And obviously, we're still going to get pulpy, trashy vampire movies as well. Thank God for that, because that's good fun as well. But I think this is really put the bar high for anyone who now wants to make a serious vampire movie. And we get that every kind of decade or so, where we get a serious film about the themes of vampirism and the ideas of the trapping. Sometimes it's from the perspective of the vampire, sometimes it's from the other people. And I think this is an example of where it's going to go. Hopefully, it's more elevated horror for monster movies in general. But if it's for vampire movies, I think we're all for it here, because I thought this film was just outstanding. I loved it. It was honestly just behind Brutalist. I was like, for me, I was like, this was my film of the month, and then I was like, oh yeah, The
Wow.
Brutalist. I wouldn't say it's as good. Okay, saying just behind is probably too generous. It was probably my number two. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, I thought it was outstanding, and I think this is going to hopefully, again, Hollywood always learns the wrong lessons from these things. So I'm
Mm.
hoping it's going to be that we start getting an influx of more interesting kind of creature feature monster movies and treating vampire stories with a bit of levitas, which we don't always get, or gravitas, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, which, again, we had with the Wolfman flopping this month and Nosferatu overperforming. Maybe they'll learn the right lesson, or maybe we'll just start getting boring artsy movies with vampires in them. I don't know. We'll have to see.
I I came in. I was very excited for Nosferatu, especially when I could barely book a seat in the cinema when I was going to see it on New Year's Day, and I came ready to have the same arguments
Mhm.
as you've just kind of laid out there. That's how I wanted to feel at the end of it. I liked the movie. I'm going to be very clear. I didn't dislike it. And I think, yeah, the box office returns, money talks, and ultimately, if it makes money, there's going to be more of it or more similar. They're going to look for more. But I don't know if it worked in the way that it needed to kind of spark a revitalization, as in,
Mhm.
this had the potential to be like, oh, the MCU isn't dominating cinema anymore, and there's kind of a void there. And it's like, again, kind of big movies about like complicated men like Oppenheimer and The Brutalist, they're kind of coming back into vogue, and or like kind of pop culture movies like Wicked or Barbie, like they're kind of packing the houses now. What's going to be the thing that takes over? And there was a world, and I was ready to enter that world where this comes in, blows us all away, and we're like, monster movies. This is the next 10 years of cinema. Everyone will be rushing to make the next great monster movies. It's going to be a monster universe. It's going to be this. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what I would have wanted, but I was ready for that. Popular or potential unpopular opinion here, right? Robert Eggers is a great movie maker, okay? He's an incredible, elite, maybe top 5 current active director today. I don't know if I feel as excited about his writing as I do his direction. I think that's where it falls down.
Mm.
I'd love to see him work off someone else's script because he brings such a distinct visual palette and a visceral vibe to the screen in every movie that he does. And I felt very similar about The Northman, a movie that I really enjoyed being in that world while being totally emotionally disconnected from the characters and their motives and what they wanted. And while I felt like I had a really good cinematic experience, it's a movie because I never felt that connection. I've never felt the need to go back to. And I feel like this is going to be the exact same as a result. And what this movie had to overcome for me, and I was thinking this as I watched it, and I go, actually, Lily Rose Depp is the person. Like, obviously, you say that Bill Skarsgård is kind of, it hinges on his performance as Nosferatu, but it's Bill Skarsgård. You brought him in for a reason. His performance is going to work, and it does. But Lily Rose Depp was kind of the what this movie hinged on, if it worked or not, because she plays this very psychosexual kind of performance as the wife of Nicholas Holt's character. And it could have driven very much into farce and drawn laughs at times, and it did to a point. But what she had to escape was, and I thought this as I watched it, is if there's memes about her performance, it's failed because people haven't bought into the concept enough that they like buy that they connect to the character and the story, and that is what will drive the success of this to push it into this is the new thing that we all want more of. And there are memes everywhere from the movie. Unfortunately, I thought she did enough. I thought she did enough to kind of carry the sensational plot to an audience that would not be familiar with what this plot was, and how sexual it is in a way that I don't feel audiences were necessarily ready for in this. Um, but there are memes everywhere, and it has become a meme because we want to connect to this movie because it gave us such a strong visual and kind of overwhelming sensation that we were left reaching for it. And when you can't connect to the story, how do you connect to it in other ways? And how do modern audiences connect to things? They connect to it through memes. And that's how people have ended up connecting to this movie. It is the gif of her shaking like a leaf in Stormone, and that's that is the abiding image of this movie, unfortunately. Whereas it probably should be the thing we think of when we think of Nosferatu should be that initial visual reveal of Nosferatu, and I feel that like the likes of yourself and myself might take that away, but I don't know if audiences are necessarily taking that away. I think they find this a bit funny and mad and a fun cinema experience, but I don't think they find it as, I don't think there's that need there that I kind of expected and wanted. But interesting that you do feel that way. So I'm not saying I own this for not monopoly or I'm speaking for everyone else. That's just my reading of the lay of the land as someone who maybe isn't as, I'm not as into monster movies, but I'm up for it. I'll try anything. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's it. I mean, I think I can definitely see your points. I will say something I was going to say that I didn't mention is it's definitely Egger's most accessible film. It's also, I will say it surprised me with how maybe straightforward it was in a lot of aspects. Like it's not as really challenging as a lot of these horror films have been that we've kind of got, as I mentioned when I talk about elevated horror. I think that in some ways the fact that it is kind of this big broad appeal is why is why it's connecting with some people. Like if he made something really different and challenging and stuff, that'd be great, but no one would give him $50 million to make this movie, and there's no way the movie would have made as much as it did. Like the legs of it would have been gone. And I think that's why it's packing things cinemas in. It's not a challenging vampire movie. It is quite straightforward. And again, the Nosferatu story in general is really straightforward. Like what people remember from that movie is, Klaus Kinski, the makeup, that look, the expressionism, cinematography, and production design of the whole thing. So I think that's what I got out of this. And I find that again, I do love Egger's use of language in general. I just feel like he puts a lot of work into the way he writes his scripts. I don't necessarily think the story aspect is always going to be strong in all his films. I think actually, in general, the story isn't something I gravitate towards with any of his movies. And I actually think The Northman was a big disappointment for me. I was not really a fan of that film at all.
Right.
Whereas this is one that I think I'm going to still go back to because I think it just felt like such an interesting world he'd created. But I can definitely see some of your points. I don't know about Lily Rose Depp's performance. I thought it was okay. I think that like again they double down on the sexuality in this film, and vampires have always been kind of sex coded, you
Yeah.
know.
They're horny
But
fuckers. They only come out at
they
night.
are, yeah. Like I mean, they
This
only
is
come out
what
at
people
night
do at night.
and they'll suck you dry. Um, but like that goes out throughout the whole film. As far as the whole memes of it, I think like when it comes to memes, I don't necessarily think it's a connection of disconnect or lack connection. I think memes are always part of the when it comes to films, especially in TV, as part of the cultural conversation. I think the fact that there is memes about this is the fact that it's hit a nerve with a larger audience. You know,
Okay.
we've
What I'd
we've
say to
also
that
had
though
one.
is there's two types of memes. Think of epic movie memes that we think of, and um a lot of memes will be driven by a quote, for example. Think of Lord of the Rings, Sean Bean, one does simply not. And the reason we remember that quote is because when he said that line, it resonated so much with us because of the story. When Lily Rose Depp shakes, it's funny. And the takeaway I have from this movie is funny. This movie worked and I connected close to it when I laughed because it was that and it was Willem Dafoe's character. Fucking hilarious. Absolute highlight of the movie. Like brought that bit of farce into this and the bit of levity that you kind of want during Robert Eggers movies because they're so self-serious that I was like, oh, that's a surprise. That's really cool. And I really like Willem Dafoe. And so they're the things that I took away from this they're the elements that I really liked in it, as well as the visuals, the story and the everything else. I just I didn't come away from this really passionate about the vampire genre, but I like that you do because I think there's a huge market for it there. So maybe it worked for fans of this type of movie, and maybe people like myself who are more agnostic towards monsters, we still found ways to connect to it. I'm not saying it was a failure or it didn't work, but maybe those reasons were different. I don't
Yeah,
know.
possibly. Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
Let's see another one. We haven't got a chance to touch base on this. I do want to talk about this. Timothy Chalamet. I think one thing we can definitely agree on is that in terms of like singing Bob Dylan, like he sounds like Bob Dylan. Like he sounds like him. No one can take that away from him. But does that make A Complete Unknown a great movie? Because it's very much in the Oscar conversation, and there's talk about building momentum in the Best Picture race as potential outside winner. Should it be discussed in these terms? What were your own thoughts?
No.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I mean, James Mangold is just continuing his trend of like making movies for everyone's dad, you know, like he's like, oh, 310 to Yuma remake, let's do it. Oh, Ford v Ferrari, yeah, we all care about cars, don't we? And here he's done Bob Dylan, which, and again, like, here's the thing, right? I like and appreciate Bob Dylan, but I'm never like I'm not a lover of Bob Dylan. I'm not throwing on Bob Dylan nonstop. I can appreciate him as a songwriter, but like when people are like, "That's right, he sounds just like Bob Dylan," I'm sorry, but that's not always a compliment if you listen to Bob
Yeah,
Dylan. Like,
he's not a great singer,
like,
like.
I mean, anyone can sing like Bob Dylan. All you got to do is like sing like you're deaf and through your nose, you know, and
Okay,
mission
okay, you've,
accomplished.
you've, you've,
Okay,
you've, okay, hold on.
go
You
ahead.
put yourself on the spot there, right?
I
You've
did.
said anyone can sing like Bob Dylan. Hit me with your Dylan.
Yeah, once upon a time, yeah, met you. There we go. Fuck off, Timothy. I don't look like you, but I can sing like you, right? But
You did
here's the
it. You
thing,
did it.
right?
I like to
It's
call
not
it down. You did it. I just got to
like
give you respect for that.
even Bob Dylan fans like will be like, yeah, I saw him live 10 times, and the 2 times I saw him, he was really good, you know. But even that conversation aside, right? Like Timothy Chalamet is obviously a good actor, but I also feel like he's kind of become he's in a really weird and interesting point because I think he's the definition of, you know, when we hear the old Hollywood like saying of like one for you, one for me. He's kind of at that point where mainstream audiences love him and the awards contenders also kind of love him. Like the people, and those two people mean that like he's just always the safe bet now to put into a nomination here. And I think like the Academy sometimes will try and they've been saying this for a while. Like a couple of years ago, they were on about introducing all sorts of weird nominations to get people to watch and get people interested. I think that's kind of why he's here. Not to take away from his performance, it's fine. But I think it's also the film itself isn't a great film. It like what I wanted out of this, and maybe I was asking for too much, and we constantly talk about music biopics here, and I've made it very clear I'm not really a fan of a lot of them. And this is like what I wanted out of this was to basically see what everybody else saw in Bob Dylan that I was missing. And basically,
Yes.
it kind doesn't it kind of feel like the film just threw its hands up, like it's like Bob Dylan is kind of inaccessible and weird, and we don't really get it. And then you're just like, oh yeah, well, are you going to tell us about that? No, he's kind of mysterious and weird, isn't he? And you're like, oh
Yeah, that's
yeah,
it. That's it.
you
You
know,
nailed it.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's called the complete unknown, and it's like, oh yeah, well, I understand what you're going for, and that he's kind of aloof and weird, but I didn't get anything new out of this. I was basically just
No.
like, oh yeah, that's an interesting kind of story. And also like the film itself didn't feel like it had a lot of like I don't know, drama or tension to it. It's like, oh God, I know it was a big moment for music, like if he goes electric, like, but like the whole thread here is it's like Bob, be careful. You might upset the folk community. Oh no. You don't want the American folk society coming after you now. Not those guys. No. Like
They make
yeah,
or
I
break
just
people, man. They make or break. Yeah, look,
yeah.
I felt the
Ugh.
exact same way. I saw Dylan perform live once. And it was in Tree Arena, the Point at the time, and he stood there with his back to everyone, sang went through all of his set, did no interaction, got paid, and fucked off. And that's the Bob Dylan experience. It's like, yeah, like no one can deny he is talented at whatever it is he does that people love. Like he's good at that. But he's also a dick. And for me, yes, I felt like this movie was made for two reasons because I feel like people looked at it in a conversation in a Hollywood boardroom and they're like, "There's never been a Bob Dylan picture. He's such a fascinating character. That's gonna
Mm.
work." And then so they made it, and Timothy Chalamet worked really hard to kind of become a true to life Dylan. And then yeah, like I said, the movie just kind of goes Bob Dylan like. He's really good in one sense, but he's also a bit of a dickhead. And the movie kind of
Mm.
goes, yeah, that's mad, isn't it? And that's it. Like, it's just like, that's the movie. And then some of the expositional scenes were awful. Like, it was some of the
Uh,
most cringy things where it's like a random audience member, presumably drunk at the end of a festival, is like, "You're you're trying to change the face of music as we know it, Bob, and we just don't accept it." You know what I mean? It's just like, no, that's not. That's not how people
uh,
say. Or they're just like, he comes out with an electric guitar and someone's throwing a can out. No one is
mm.
that angry at an electric guitar. I'm like, that didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
The movie one thing works in this movie, and it's Edward Norton's performance. And I was really glad to see Edward Norton back and like a different side to him and a kind of a new chapter of his career. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can make room for Ed Norton again. Like, and I thought that his character worked. Everything else just felt kind of like, yeah, well, we have to have a Bob Dylan movie because there's a lot of Bob Dylan fans, and Chalamet were bringing the young people. So all of that on my spreadsheet says money, and it probably worked in that sense, and like that's fine. But there was like I walked into the cinema and there was two like 16, 17-year-old girls walking in ahead of me, and I'm like, oh, there's the Chalamet audience. You know what I mean? And I just gonna sound weird. I thought about them during the movie, like, but I was like, is this working for them? Because I'm like you said, it has to explain to us why Bob Dylan matters, but we'd be a bit more in touch with who he was in general. I'm like, they're walking in not knowing who this guy is, just on the basis that they love Timothy Chalamet. And I don't know. I didn't talk to them afterwards. I thought about them too much. It would have been weird if I went up and go, "What did you think of that, girls?" 37-year-old man there by myself. But I don't imagine they walked away with that going, "Geez, we have to listen to some Dylan," or
Yeah.
"Wow, like Electric really changed the game
But I
in the
think
folk
that's
community."
like an interesting because like you mentioned all the reasons why they would make this film, and like
Yeah,
what I always thought is like say like again James Mangold also directed Walk the Line like which really was one of the ones that that and Ray were kind of what kicked off the mad rush for music biopics I think in a certain way, and he kind of like when you look at something like Johnny Cash's life you're like there's a load of really interesting things here, and then you're looking at this Bob Dylan thing and you're like what is why like I get the story is like him changing to electric, but like nothing really interesting happens.
no, and that's the thing. That's Bob Dylan. That is the experience. He's
Yeah,
an
it's like but that's
asshole
like
because
it,
he's an asshole. Like he's really creative, but he's an asshole. And they
yeah,
literally must have combed through his career and looked for anything that resembled an arc, and that's what they
yeah.
fell on. And then we got a movie as a result. But it is not. It's not the Dylan story. There is no
Mhm.
Dylan story. He made some good songs. They're catchy. He's good, like he's an average vocalist. Like Tom just like did everything that Chalamet did in the movie, like when put in the spot two
Where's my
seconds ago.
Oscar? Where's my Oscar?
But he doesn't have a story. He's just Bob Dylan. Like good songs, bit of a dick.
The freewheeling
There.
Bob Dylan, baby. That's
You've
it.
seen the movie. You've seen the movie. That's it, guys. You've even got a vocal performance you weren't expecting. Like you save yourself the 2 hours. Um, Speaking of saving time, you could have saved time this month by ignoring the renaissance of naughty's icons. Angelina Jolie came back in Maria, which again a lot of people were expecting would get her Best Actress nominee. It did not. And Nicole Kidman kind of had her a big moment and kind of rolling back the years to kind of Arise Wide Shut days with Baby Girl. I've seen both, Tom. I know you've seen Baby Girl in particular. Was this the renaissance you were looking for?
I mean, God, if this is a renaissance or something, I'm kind of worried about what it's going to birth because I just did not get this film at all.
So
Um,
weird.
like I don't know. I mean, first of all, like when anytime you go into one of these erotic thrillers, I kind of always like, oh, okay. Like, what do I actually want out of an erotic thriller? I want obviously the thriller aspect, and I kind of wanted to be sexy, and there was no part of me that watched this film and was like, "Oh yeah, that's sexy." It was just kind of awkward, and I like, and again, like you mentioned like that article recently from was it the New York Times, and yeah, like I don't think it would have been less awkward if I wasn't watching it in the cinema. You know, it was just kind of watching it and being like, "Oh, this is a little bit strange." I don't.
Just for reference, for those who don't know, and I'll put the article in the show notes. We probably won't get time to debate it, but we kind
Yeah.
of touched on a lot of the themes. It's an article about laughing in the cinema at movies
Mm-hmm.
like Nosferatu and Baby Girl. Anora is one that we've kind of discussed previously. Like,
Mm-hmm.
should you be laughing at Anora when traumatic things are happening, but they are also kind of funny? And is it misinterpreting it, or is it the joy of the live celebration? Yeah, like Baby Girl, like, yeah, it was very much like it felt like I was watching it on a hen do. It felt very reminiscent of the 50 Shades of Grey days, though, and there was a lot of laughter throughout.
Yeah, like I hadn't seen any of the Fifty Shades stuff, but this is like this is if this is meant to be like the good compared to this, I don't I can't imagine how bad those films are. Like I didn't care about any of the characters. The story wasn't that interesting. I mean there was maybe a few genuine laughs in it sometimes. Um, but like there wasn't really like again, I'm not saying that I'm like this I'm not saying that I'm very knowledgeable about all the world aspects of sex and all these different caveat stuff, but I'm just like watching this and I'm like, this seems kind of boring and vanilla versus what was kind of sold to me. Like there's nothing here that I was like, oh wow, whoa, this is opening up a whole new world and sexual awakening. I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that is something out there, isn't it? You know, like I mean the film like seems all about like the real thing they're pushing is like milk. Oh yeah, drink the milk in the saucer. Oh, that's right, I sent you a mysterious glass of milk. And I'm meant to be like, oh wow, oh, it's titillating, you know, like no, it's just kind of odd, I suppose. Yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, whatever floats your boat, Nicole Kidman. Um, but I don't know. Like it's, I also like people were like, "Oh, Nicole Kidman got snubbed." I don't think she really gave a great performance. I thought it was fine, and I know people are kind of saying like, "Oh, this is a really brave performance for a woman of her age in Hollywood to be doing this sexual film and oh, you know, this thing bearing it all and this kind of stuff." And I'm like, yeah, but we're also like not gonna act like Nicole Kidman looks like a normal woman her age. So I don't think you can kind of play that both ways. You know what I mean? It's like you can't say like, oh, it's both fearless for her to be up there as a woman in like what age in her 50s or whatever. But also it's like, yeah, but she also has had lots of work done, so she doesn't look like your normal woman in her 50s. So it's like, is like you can't be saying you can't be having your cake and eating it too in that regard. I don't think.
Yeah.
You know, like is there anything I liked about the film? I mean, I thought Harris Dickinson was decent. I thought Antonio Banderas was all right in it, but like, I don't know. The main things you want out of an erotic thriller, I guess, is that it feels erotic and it's thrilling, and you know, you know, fail on both those counts. So I just kind of watched this, and then I like the resounding question I had like coming out of the film was nothing to do with the film. I was just like, why did I watch this film? Why
Yeah.
did why did I do this? Why did I just sit through that? So I don't know. I think yeah, I unless you're a massive Nicole Kidman fan or I don't know, really like you know, someone who watches every erotic thriller out there, like which I
Pornhub is
don't want.
free, lads. Porn, you
Yeah,
get that
yeah,
on your
yeah.
phone, lads.
Like
Like,
you know,
there's
it's just
so
I don't
much.
know.
If that's what you're looking for, like, I'm just saying, like, it's not.
Yeah, like
Save yourself
spend
the
your time
time.
better. You know, like
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
yeah.
Just it's not economic, lads. Yeah. Like, I came into this month really excited for, to see Angelina Jolie and Nicole Kidman back, and just to see, right, what are they working on? What's it? Very similar to Ed Norton, what I just said there. They're entering new phases in their career. Um, but that doesn't, like, so what have they got to offer? Where are they looking? These are both bold turns, and that Angelina Jolie is going very heavily into, I'm a real actor now. I'm not a sex symbol. I'm not kind of what you would have previously. So, and I'm like, okay, I've seen this done plenty of times before. But I'm interested to see in what you have, and I haven't seen you in a while in a new movie. So what have the years kind of added to you? What have you been working on? Where's your interest? Nicole Kidman, obviously, it would be how game she was, I suppose, and like what she was willing to give to the screen. She was willing to do quite a lot. Like, the movie Baby Girl starts with her orgasming, and then like sneaking off to masturbate, and all of which are kind of, very detailed scenes. But I went into this kind of going, right, if there was a boxing match at the end of it, I want to know who won, Jolie or Kidman. And if this was a boxing match, it'd be $1 million baby boxing match where one of them just fell and whacked their head off a chair and died, rather than there being a conclusive winner and loser here of two heavyweight greats like going toe to toe. Because Jolie won this month by not embarrassing herself, I guess. But did Maria, like, I know you haven't seen it. You don't need to. It's not
Oh,
good. There's nothing redeeming to it, other than kind of you're like, hey, geez, Angelina Jolie at times plays someone who's 20 and she can still get away with it. You know what I mean? And fair play, like she's timeless. But yeah, like, a lot of it is just save yourself the time here. Like, Jolie spent 7 months opera training for a role that she effectively, apart from a couple of scenes where the purpose of it was that she doesn't have the same voice that she used to, because it's Jolie singing versus recordings where she's lip syncing. You don't actually hear her, so it could have been like you could have saved 7 months there.
that
Just
totally
sing
that
like you.
that reminded me of, like, remember when Maestro came out like a couple of years ago, and Bradley Who was like, I spent 4 years learning to conduct, and then you look at him, he was like, yeah, that's just him waving his arms around, right? Like, it's like, it's like, dude, you could have just pretended, just act, it's fine.
Yeah. Um, like it literally is. Maria's just a really annoying film, where they don't do a particularly like favorable kind of perception of Maria Callas, but I don't feel like they knew that. She just comes across as really dislikable and a prima donna, and her life seems very lonely and sad in her latter days. And um I don't think they justified its existence by telling me, why am I interested in this sad famous person's life? And there were hints and glimmers of what could have been there. Like, there's a sit down dinner with John Kennedy where they kind of discuss their partners maybe having an affair. And obviously, if you know history, the two people they were with, Jackie and I can't think of the other guy's name, but basically Maria Callas' best friend, ended up getting married later. So spoilers, they were. And you're like, okay, that would have been really interesting. But no, it's actually we're spending time with her in the days leading towards her death, which is just really depressing, like watching someone at that stage of their career. And I'm like, is that what Angelina Jolie's trying to tell us? Because I was looking at it narratively through those lens. And that's the winner of the two. Because Baby Girl, I don't know. I want to give credit. I'll give credit where it's due. All right. To the movie's credit, it got big reactions. The audience I watched it with, they were very much the same types of audiences who went to see 50 Shades and saw it as an opportunity for a night out with the girls, and we'll go see this and we'll have a bit of crack and we'll have a few drinks beforehand. They were really engaged by this movie. I was not. I found it really embarrassing because I'm like, at the very least, Harris Dickinson's a great actor. Nicole Kidman can act as well. Like, there's a potentially high floor here. I don't even think it hit the floor. And it's because it's an erotic thriller that just doesn't seem thought through at any stage. Like, even the sex scenes. And again, I know it's not necessarily trying to be sexy. It's more trying to be tense and focus on the threat of all of this and so on. Like, the sex scenes felt like Dickinson and Nicole Kidman spent a lot of time together getting close and kind of built a comfort level with each other, to the point that they're like, we'll just kind of wing it and make it sexy and feel natural. And then they got there on the day and they didn't have anything to do. They hadn't thought of ideas and didn't get much direction. So they're like, intimacy coordinator, what's sexy? And they're like, I don't know, put your hands in her mouth. Do you like that too? Yeah, that was it. And it was just like, and the scene went on really long, and you're just like, this is not doing anything for anyone. And that makes me question all of the characters' decisions here. Why is everyone going to such lengths for this? Like, it's just, it feels like a kind of bad sexual drunk encounter you have, that you're like, I'm just gonna go home and pretend that that never happened, and I'm never gonna think of this again. I'm gonna choose not to think of this. And then also, but just the kind of, they didn't really have anything for the threat of what was happening. It's a really interesting dynamic of a dissatisfied female CEO has a sexual awakening, but that the danger that puts her in reputationally and so on, and flipping kind of the traditional narrative of the older man fucking his secretary, and how does that work? That's a really interesting concept. But again, it just seemed like they assumed we'll do it all in the day. It's gonna work, isn't it? Because it's such a good concept, and they just never thought through what are we going to do with it? Like, we have to have something happen. And they just like cobbled together something in the end, and they made it dramatic. But it just, yeah, it Nicole Kidman failed worse than Angelina Jolie, but that does not make Angelina Jolie a winner. You can ignore both of these movies. There's so many other good movies out. Go see A Real Pain. It's very funny. But that's that. Tom, that's January at the movies. What are you looking forward to seeing in February?
Ooh, I mean, the new Captain America's out, so that's like my nerdy pick. I mean, there's a lot coming out in February. I was looking at the listings earlier, and I'm like, is it like next weekend? I was looking at what to see, and I was like, there's like three or four things coming out that I want to see there. Like, we have Love Hurts, which I'm kind of interested to see, which is Ki Hu Kwan. As kind of an action star, which I find interesting because that was like basically when he disappeared for 20 years, I think he was a stunt coordinator. So I'm like, okay, let's see how this actually looks. Even September 5th is coming out. Very confusing. I keep seeing it. I'm like, why are you coming out in February? You have to come out in September.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me your release date? Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in because it's I think it's to do with the Munich Olympics, which Spielberg made Munich, which is a film I absolutely loved. So I'm hoping that's going to get some of that. That even has some Oscar nominations behind it as well. I think it has a screenplay nomination. I think. So those are the ones that kind of jumping out to me anyway. But I think February is another really packed month.
Last Showgirl is also out as well.
Yes.
Pamela Anderson tries to weigh in. I feel like she's gonna win here. I feel like she's going to jump in, make this like Seth Rollins style cash in where it's a one-on-one kind of WrestleMania main event. She just comes in at the last minute, makes it a triple threat and wins. Yeah, Captain America, I'm also looking forward to seeing. I'm still here. It's the one best picture nomination I haven't seen. So it's getting a lot of interesting reviews from people who have seen it going, what's this doing here? So I'm going to go in with an open mind, though. I'm going to cheat a little bit here, though, and say and recommend a movie I've already seen that I'll talk about next month. But the one thing I'll say is do not look into anything, like have the same experience as me. Know that this movie is good and then just go in completely cold to this movie, because otherwise you'll ruin a lot of the effectiveness for itself. Companion, I can't wait to speak about it. I
Same.
I went away and I'm like, I like that more than the Brutalist because that makes this show over. And then I'm like, no, I saw it in February. Technically saw it in February. It's fine. Don't look up anything about it. Just go. Trust me. It's an hour and a half of your life. Trust me. It's yeah. It's very good. Tom, end the plug. What's going on at the Pop Cup Pod? Anything coming up?
Well, I kind of hibernated through January because I was just wrecked from all the stuff
busy
going on.
December.
It was a very busy December. I did put out a review of Better Man for Movies and Milk, which we're kind of revamping a little bit this year. So there's going to be more Movies and Milk coming. I've also just been busy working on new projects that I'm going to be very excited to reveal soon. So yeah, I think February is going to be kind of busy. So yeah, lots coming up as always. December was one of our biggest months views and subscription wise. So if anyone did check out, thanks very much for that. And yeah, if you haven't, go over there, like, subscribe, because it's going to be kicking off again real soon.
Link is in the show notes, guys. Check it out. In the meantime, next time on page 180, it's time for my annual catch up with Kento. We're going to have a sports show later this week as we preview the Super Bowl, which obviously, as an Eagles fan, I'm very invested in as well. Talking some Six Nations and the new League of Ireland season. Tom, always a pleasure to discuss the movies with you. Thank you so much, as always. And follow Tom at Pop Cup Pod. Like I said, link is in the show notes. But until next time, this has been page 180. This has been January at the movies. And Tom, I've seen the things in this world that will make Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb.